Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Metropolis. I am your host, Calden Rangdodatsampa, and I'm joined by returning guest, Katya Loinez. How are you, Katya?
Hello. I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day in Montreal.
It's a gorgeous day in Montreal, and here I am in a studio alone,
Shame.
lit up by artificial LEDs. Katya, I brought you on because there's a piece of news I think is relevant to people who are foodies, concerned with food. Delicious meals, perhaps.
Oh,
I know you to be an excellent cook.
that is true. Not to
Yeah,
toot my own horn.
like all of these verifiable,
Yep.
verifiable. Well, on May 15th, 2025, Michelin announced that restaurants across Quebec have now received the illustrious Michelin star. 9 in total got the designation. One in Quebec City got 2 stars. 3 restaurants in Montreal got stars. These are Mastar, Sabayon, and Europea. And 7 in Montreal got the Bib Gourmand. And meanwhile, 44 were added to the Michelin recommended list, which is, I know, still a big deal. People still see a bump from getting on that list, but it's not quite a star. Did you hear about this news, Katya?
Yes, I did. I think when I heard about it, I was number one surprised because I thought that Montreal was already on the Michelin star or Michelin list. And then I think my immediate thought was like, oh, like what do I imagine being on the Michelin list? And I was like, oh, easy, L'Express.
Mm-hmm.
And then L'Express is just like I think one of the recommended of like the 100 restaurants that are recommended in the province, which is hilarious because like L'Express is like a middle class suburban person's idea of a fancy restaurant. It's in my mind the fanciest restaurant I've been to in Montreal, but it I guess does not compete in the terms of like price range and overall elite stuffiness than like Sabayon and these other places are. When I saw the list, I was like, I don't know any of these places that got a star.
Yeah, I think some of these places I've heard of, but they absolutely exist. I think outside of my tax bracket. I mean, even the restaurants on the Bib Gourmand list, which are supposed to be restaurants that they suggest that are more. I don't. They don't use the word affordable. They use the word accessible, which just means that the quality is great for the price, but the price is still somewhat high.
Yeah,
So, Katya, I brought you on because you're a foodie. You enjoy
yes,
food.
that
You
is true. I
cook.
guess by the millennial definition of what a foodie is, I cook, but I also I dabble in food writing here and there. I sometimes I'll write an essay. I've written in Maisonneuve about Asian grocery stores, and I wrote about dépanneurs a long time ago, actually, back in my student journalism days. So I'm always very interested in food, why it matters. I think there's a lot to be said about it, and I think on a face value, you're like, oh, the Michelin stars, what does that have to do anything with the progressive podcast of Montreal? Well,
Hmm.
we're here to prove you wrong. There's
That's
actually
right.
a lot we can say about, I think, the state of Montreal in this current moment of Michelin, which, again, when I was like, oh, we are already on that, it kind of feels like passe. Like, I feel like this whole circus about the Michelin, it feels like silly for it to still exist because there's so many things that are like blatantly and obviously wrong about it. Like I feel it's kind of stupid to be like, oh, this is obviously like elitist, like racist, very colonial, very European.
Hmm.
It feels so obvious to say that because I think most people already know that.
Yeah, I think people in our sort of circles aren't
Mhm.
quite waiting at the edge of their seats to find out this news. But I do think I reached out to you because I knew you would have some good takes, some good hot takes on this, and we could really get into these things
Yeah.
that you mentioned about why this sort of institution is sort of flawed. Because I mean, most of the coverage I've seen here in Montreal have been just kind of either celebratory. People talk about finally it's here, but a lot of the food writers in Montreal, I think, are sort of disappointed.
Yeah. They're
A
like,
lot,
hey,
yeah, yeah.
yay.
Only three
Yeah.
restaurants.
I will say it is crazy on face value. If you were like a stupid person or an alien and you were like landed on Earth and you're like, this is the guy that's going to tell me where the good food is, and you saw it, and they're all in Quebec City, and it's a lot of, yeah, it's just a lot of like Quebecois takes on French fine dining, like a
Hmm.
caribou with shaved white truffle on top on
Right.
like a birch plate. And honestly, if I were kind of like a middle-aged food critic and I'd spent my entire life like puffing up Montreal and like to be kind of like see the city rep excluded, I would be mad, but for a different reason that I am mad. Because you're
Right.
like,
Right. Of
what
course.
about me? Yeah.
What about me? What about my tastes and my
Yeah.
spots in
It does
town?
kind of feel like when the Oscars come around, and then obviously, like, most good movies are not on the Academy list, and people are like, Oscars, stupid again. And it's like,
Hmm.
I don't know what you expected. This is like a very commercial enterprise that is going to award commercial filmmaking.
Of course. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes they get it right. I think
Sometimes they get it right. And that's the thing
what.
about Michelin. Sometimes they'll get it right too.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's like I think what I think I enjoy about these kinds of accolades like the Oscars and like Michelin is that it sort of forces a conversation, right? I mean, even them coming to Montreal kind of brings this conversation up
Hmm.
of like, what kind of food do we elevate? What kind of uh, restaurant scene should we have?
Yeah.
Is this worth some kind of prestigious global standard? Do we want it to be worth that prestigious global standard? And of course, how does that change these restaurants and these cities? And that's sort of, I think, the guiding questions that both of us had
Yeah,
looking into
totally.
this.
Because if we're thinking about like the very definition of a gatekeeper, like the very definition of like an institution that will like set the barometer for what is taste and for what is like class, it's Michelin. Like it's
Right.
the Academy Awards. It's I don't know, like the Nobel Prize. Like these are things that even as an ordinary person, you're like, well, it's never going to affect me because I'm never going to have enough money to go to the Michelin. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not XYZ. It
Hmm.
does, I guess, have a kind of a trickle down effect for just like how you're like, yeah, how we shape ourselves and how we act when we like know that there's this sort of ideal we should be achieving when most of us aren't going to do that. It really limits ourselves and it limits our worldviews.
No, no, absolutely. It's sort of like they kind of help curate global tastes, right? In the way that the Oscars might be like, this is officially, so objectively good movie. You know, Michelin is
Yeah.
sort of does that for restaurants and food.
I think it was like Bong Joon Ho when he won his Oscar. He was like, "It's been so nice to come to this regional American award," which in many ways is what the Michelin is. It's a regional culinary award, and so
Hmm.
it's very funny. I think it shows kind of how self-absorbed, I guess, like the West, if I could use an indicator for this group of people I'm talking about, tends to be like you think about the Americans when they have the World Series for baseball, and it's like
Yeah,
World
yeah,
Series, babe, you have Toronto, and that's like it. And so it's this kind of idea of like already demarking the world and seeing it from a very narrow lens. Because the
yeah.
Michelin was like, oh, we're the utmost guide of food, but they didn't, I think, expand out of Europe until like 2002, 2006, which is very crazy to think about the fact they've been around since like literally 1900.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They've been around 100 years. Just stayed purely in like Europe, some parts of North Africa, but then even those they haven't continued the guide in places like Algeria and Tunisia where they started
Yeah, and it was
off.
only just because they were French colonies.
Of course,
I did.
and
Apparently, it was really controversial in the '60s, but the editor in chief was German, and this caused a huge uproar in Germany and I think France, because I guess to the French people who read the Michelin, the grossest food on earth is German, and so they're like, "How could a German?" Which is really funny to have this sort of like I don't know DEI
yeah, yeah, yeah.
backlash for a German woman running the Michelin, and I'm like, you know what? Fair. I don't know what this woman knows about food.
That's so funny.
I know.
I love the kind of I love that different kind of contextualizing of like maybe like not DEI politics as they weren't known then, but essentially that's at the root of it,
It
right? It's
was
like
sort of like
different.
identitarian politics. Then
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
different was to like literally be German. But now I guess the Michelin's reach is bigger, and so what can be decided as different is also bigger.
right. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of spoke about it, but yeah. So Michelin has been expanding across North America, Asia, and the Middle East over the last 20 years. Since 2022, it's been in Canada, having visited the cities of Toronto and Vancouver in that order. Toronto got a sushi restaurant that got 2 stars. So now Quebec has become the 12th Michelin Guide destination in North America. Now, some people might be wondering, what does it take to get a Michelin star? I think my assumptions are like yummy, yummy food.
Basically,
Yeah.
it's like kind of like in Ratatouille. Like I have a very Ratatouille inspired view of like culinary dining as a child. I watched that and I was like, that's what fine dining is.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just
yeah.
feel like, yeah, it's white cloths, it's waiters with little bow ties, it's
Hmm.
hand towels, is what I assume. But yeah, I guess did you want to talk about how the Michelin, like how they decide where to go? Because I remember, actually, I do remember now when it was announced they were going to Vancouver and Toronto. I remember seeing like Cult Montreal posted people being like, "Why aren't they going to Montreal
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
first?"
Kind of like the upset kid, like, no, what?
But it's the
How
same
about
people who were
us?
like, and they didn't even include Montreal
Yeah,
more
yeah.
than Quebec City. It's like the same kind of crowd.
No, absolutely. It's I mean, it's interesting because people. I mean, so many people are proud of. I mean, have this kind of like local pride, right? Almost like it's almost like a local nationalism. They're like, "Go Habs, go!" And also, my food is the best. My city's food is is my favorite food, and it's the best in the world, and it needs to be recognized, right, by these
Yes,
like institutions.
and the long-standing Montreal Toronto just like beef, I guess.
Of course. Hey,
Which I think is like needed. It's quite needed.
yeah, I think it's always
It's
healthy
healthy.
for
Yeah.
cities to have. You know, just get a little, get
Yeah.
it. You got to get it out. You know.
Having lived in a place where like everyone hated being there, it kind of sucks when everyone just dogs on where you live because you're like,
Sure.
hey, what the hell?
Hey, cut it out.
Yeah.
You leave them alone.
Yeah. But I guess they're never gonna have a Michelin guide to London, Ontario. That'd be
Hey,
crazy though.
you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, they've been going to like some smaller towns and like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think still smaller cities and
But I guess the only reason they go to those smaller towns is because they pay people to. Like it's not like the Michelin decides. They essentially have to get money because they have to pay their anonymous judges.
inspectors. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
inspectors.
Where would you give a Michelin star in London, Ontario?
Oh, where would I give a Michelin star?
Yeah, or the Katia star.
Oh, there's a Portuguese chicken place, which is so good. It's better than any place in Montreal. It's called like
Whoa.
Rei de Leitos or like King of the Pigs.
Okay.
Delicious. Every time I
Okay.
go there, it's the best. It's like in a strip mall.
Now you
So you
know,
should go. Yeah,
audience
you should
member.
go.
Sweet.
But yeah,
Uh,
honestly, being a Michelin judge or inspector seems like a fun job. Apparently, you're sworn to secrecy. You're not allowed to tell your family. You're supposed
yeah,
to
you're like a
lie.
spy.
Which is like, I would immediately tell people. I would be so bad at it. I'd be like, I'm here with a Michelin guide when I showed up.
Big cap with the
Yeah,
Michelin on it.
but
You're like,
yeah,
guess who's back?
yeah. I'm like, oh, it's on the company. But I guess yeah, I guess what Montreal, Quebec spent $2.1 million getting these inspectors to go to a bunch of restaurants, which is crazy because yeah, the
Yeah.
restaurants don't pay it, but the tourism board does, which is
Yeah.
an important
So
distinction.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's always some kind of like conflict because people have tried to bring it up that like it's sort of unfair that Michelin has to be paid to bring their inspectors to some place. I think Michelin says that the money doesn't quite go towards. I mean, it obviously does go towards making sure that they have I guess the staffing capacity to send people. I don't know about it sounding fun because it seems like I heard one interview with this inspector and he was like, it's kind of like I've fallen out of love with it.
Aw,
He talks about like
I guess that
some of them.
happens when something's your job.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's the job curse. Doing something for work makes it kind of it brings it into a different realm, I think, of enjoyment. But he was talking about how he has to eat like 300 meals a year, and it's funny to be complaining about that. It's like my job's hard.
I have
I
to
have
eat
to
so much
eat
foie gras.
I have to eat so much delicious food, but it does sound sort of like I don't know. It does sound like
It's
excessive,
like a
right?
sensory
Gluttonous.
overload. Yeah, it
No,
is a job
exactly.
that you're like, oh, it sounds fun, but I guess if you look at it, you're like, that would just be like a lot. Like you just
Yeah,
be overwhelmed. Everything
yeah.
would taste the same.
It's something like 300 meals a year, and apparently multiple times it's like lunch and dinner. So you're hitting like two places in a day, and
Yeah,
then
and I guess you have to
often
get like dessert too. Yeah, you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
go
you have
back.
to.
They'll send multiple people because I guess one of their criteria is consistency.
Yes, let's go through those criteria. So these are the
Yes.
following criteria: the quality of ingredients, the harmony of flavors, the mastery of cooking techniques, the chef's unique voice and personality in the cuisine, and consistency across multiple visits and throughout the menu. Each restaurant undergoes several inspections annually, so I guess that's just a. I think I've heard about places just overcooking a scallop once, and then it's enough to have them remove a star from the restaurant.
Brutal.
Absolutely brutal. So yeah, I mean you're talking about it before, but it is over the next 3 years. This is reported by the Journal de Montréal. Over the next 3 years, the total costs for the Michelin Guide is going to be $2.1 million. This sum is to promote the guide. This was paid for by this is the gigantic like partnership that was behind bringing this to Quebec. The Quebec Tourism Industry Alliance, Destination Quebec City, the City of Quebec, Tourism Montreal, the City of Montreal, Destination Centreville, and the Economic Development Canada for the Regions of Quebec office. That's the DEC office. That's a federal body. So that's these. I think it's eight. I had to count, but yeah, these eight organizations that have been working together to get this to get Michelin to come to Quebec. Quebec's actually the first, I think, entire province that got the coverage, rather than just the cities that paid for it. But yeah, I guess
2.1 mil.
it's why in the guide you see like some like more rural places like in Rimouski or Bromo even.
Honestly, good for them. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, sure, what the hell.
I
Also,
think.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, also putting them in Brahma and Rimouski, they're really aiming for like the person who's gonna do a road trip from Montreal to Quebec City and then maybe Gaspé Peninsula afterward,
Well,
or
it's
Rimouski just at least, yeah. And
this is
they're gonna
run by
make a lot of money.
this is a tire company, right?
Yeah,
That's the OG goal. You
yeah.
drive around.
Literally, they make this to sell tires and to
Yeah,
incentivize people to drive. And I
absolutely.
remember when I first saw that number, I was like 2.1 million, and then I actually thought it like the grand scheme of the city's budget, and I was like, okay, it's actually not that much money. But when you think of the investment of $2.1 million by these eight collective bodies and two promoting these very expensive restaurants into these places that are already big tourist destinations, especially for international tourists, not just from the States, but like from Europe, because we get so many FFF, Français de la France, or like French from France,
Of course.
people who just come and visit all the time. I feel like they will, honestly, I think it will be a good investment in terms of if they just want to promote the specific brand of tourism and get a lot of people to spend a lot of money going to these places, that is going to work. But the question is at what cost?
No, exactly. I think you're hitting the nail around the head because I think at first I wanted to come to this. I think at first my initial gut feeling was like 2.1 million. That could have gone to, and then I just thought about it. I was like 2.1 million by like I
What's
think
the
like
police
eight.
budget? Isn't it like in the billions?
Police budget I think is approaching 1 billion. I think it's around
Yeah.
like 900 million or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll have to confirm that. I'll put it up on the screen right now. That's the budget. Look at that. That's so much. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, 2.1 million over 3 years in terms of cost, like you're saying, really not that much. But it's sort of like, I think to me, it's less about the actual like sheer cost of it, and more like you're saying, what is the actual kind of like what is going to be the consequences from this,
Yeah.
right?
The
What
ripple
is
effect.
the ripple effects from this? Because it's something that's like I think for them a great investment, like you're saying, right? They get to spend relatively little money to elevate the province and Quebec City and Montreal, and of course the regional restaurants. They bring them up to like international standards. I think we saw this survey that was conducted by the Ministry of Tourism here in Quebec that indicated 70% of potential visitors for the summer season in Quebec are interested in Quebec's culinary scene. So this is them really like trying to like cater exactly to this kind of crowd, right? Because
Exactly.
people want to
And
come here for the culture, the food, and
yeah.
now hey, they get to come here for food for restaurants that have been already listed and like very kind of like well reputed lists by like either like where like best restaurants in Canada. We have multiple like Mon Lapin is number two best restaurant in Canada
Yeah.
for a few years. It was number
And
one
that
best
was Mon
restaurant.
Lapin. It was not given a star.
And
I
Mon
don't even know
Lapin
if
is
it was
not
on the
given a
list.
star.
It's
I think
shocking.
I do believe it was on the recommended list. But I mean, yeah. So there's that. There's those kind of things where I mean, of course, there's those shocks, right? I'm like, why didn't my favorite spot get that? Actually haven't been to Mont Lapin, but
Yeah, I've never been
um,
either.
talking about the ripple effects, I think when I was sort of wondering what's going to happen now. There's some assumptions I have given the research I've done, the how I am familiar with the ebb and flow of capitalism and sort of capitalist developments. On the one level, we can talk about at the actual restaurant. So when we look at
For sure.
other cities, other restaurants that have gone this, reservations usually go up 30-40%, sometimes like almost like overnight as well. I think some of the Montreal restaurants said that as soon the day they received the designation that their books were completely full, almost immediately within hours.
I know that happened to Sabayon. I think I saw that. It was like instantly they were booked up for the next 2 months. Like anything their resi could take, it was just like booked.
Yeah, and that's like I think that's like 14 seats. It's a very small place as well, right? So it's this place that
Okay.
was already kind of hard to get seats at, and now it's like
Impossible.
pretty much impossible. I don't know what's the longest you've waited for. Like, have you ever like really done like a really long wait for a reservation?
Honestly, no. I like actually
Respect.
wait, no, once will express but it was because I planned many months in advance to have my birthday dinner there. I
Oh,
was like,
lovely.
I want to go to the Express. I'm gonna find a time that works for my friends, and getting six people together to decide on a dinner time. You're planning months in advance. Everyone's
Yeah, you
busy.
have to. You have to.
Yeah,
It's part
but
of
yeah,
adulthood.
I guess
I
yeah,
think.
you have these things. I guess with the Michelin, yeah, suddenly they're all booked up. But that is not. I feel like the entire like culture of food being around this place being very hard to get into like defeats the enjoyment of food.
Of
It
course.
really reminds me of Ticketmaster, honestly. Like going to a concert is fun, but having to spend a lot of money and a lot of time to like hack Ticketmaster to try and get a cheap price is not fun. There's no spontaneity in it. It's even like I guess in Montreal there'll be like after hours parties or raves or
Hmm.
concerts that are like you could used to just be able to walk up because you're like I don't know what I'm doing at 3 a.m. tonight, but now you have to pay $50 in advance, weeks in advance, and having that
Hmm.
whole ticketing system, I think just really sucks the joy out of life.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, that's a classic kind of thing, right? This kind of exclusivity, right? The hype,
Hmm.
and sort of the exclusivity that comes from that hype. Just being able to flex that, like, yeah, I got this thing. I mean, this is just like class. This I don't know. This is like time immemorial, like showing off wealth, right? Like,
Yeah.
I got this thing that's hard to get.
It's just
Like
like a
back.
scarcity. It's just commodity
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fetishism. Yeah.
This thing that's scarce, I have it.
Yeah. And
Oh,
you don't.
check out my lace dress. This took 12 people like 8 months to make, and I'm just wearing it like it's like my pajamas. That's like old school stuff. And then now it's like, yeah, I got a reservation at Sabayon, which has a Michelin star.
Yeah.
To the rich laugh.
I forget who said it, but it's like as we like after the industrial revolution, as commodities themselves become more accessible to the masses, you see rich people investing more in experiences, which is definitely what the Michelin is.
Oh
You
yeah.
have these rich people, I don't know, getting a membership to Soho House because like any poor person can get a beer, but they can't do it at the Soho House. And like same
No.
with Michelin, it's like anyone can get a meal, but like the entire experience of having the thing that is expensive given to you,
Mhm.
but not actually having to keep it, becomes the value, and that becomes the status symbol.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this gets into something interesting, right? Because now, we talk about Michelin and sort of before we talk, you were mentioning kind of like food colonialism specifically, right? And the kind of like these Western customs that the guide naturally kind of forces,
For
right?
sure.
But we see in Asia, you do see some different kind of like ways that the Michelin system, I guess, bestows stars. In Singapore, for example, there's that food stall that's just kind of roast chicken. It's like $5 or $15. They gave that place a star, and now
Honestly, I bet it was good.
I'm sure it
I'm
was
sure,
right. I'm
yeah.
sure it was,
I'm sure all these
but
places are honestly good. That's the thing.
yeah, I have no doubt in my mind about them being good, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's something I think we should note for listeners and viewers, that this is not necessarily saying that these places don't deserve stars, or that even the people who work at these places don't deserve the star. Because of course, like I do think we have to reckon that there's an absolute like technical kind of mastery that it takes to cook at this
Absolutely.
level, and I think as someone who cooks often, I'm always in awe of the kind of the skills it takes to
Yeah.
run these kinds of
I'd
places.
love to go to a restaurant and order something that I can't make myself. That's why you
That's
should be going to a restaurant. You
the
shouldn't
best way
eat
to order.
something that you literally could not make yourself.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you can
I'm
make it
not.
at home, just make it at home, honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I'm not making hollandaise sauce. I'm getting the guy at this restaurant to make it for me.
oh
I'm
my
getting
god, for
the.
sure. Yeah.
Anyways, to talk about like
Oh
the
yeah, food
cheapness, right?
colonialism.
Because
Yes.
you have this guy. Sometimes I think about the way some guides exist, right? Because I think in my head, like what comes to mind is sort of is like kennel club guides. You ever see those?
Honestly, no.
So this is like this. We're talking about like the kennel clubs are like there's like a British one, there's an American one, there's a Canadian one as well. It's sort of like it's like a guide of like dogs. It's like this is what this dog breed should look like,
Oh yes.
And then at the shows, they try to judge which dog best represents what's written down in their kind of like what this dog looks like. But then, as I mean, if people aren't familiar, like if you look up dog breeds like 100 years ago, they look completely different.
Yes, I
Uh,
do know actually about this. I know about the exact kennel club specifications, but I have done my research into purebred dogs, and it is upsetting. They used to look
there you
very
go.
different. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
live
So
very hard lives because of the inbreeding.
no, exactly, and they're bred this way to just sort of try to, and it's because these breeders are trying to make them perfectly fit these like distinction, like written definitions of what these dogs should look like, which was written kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say arbitrarily, but like it's a thing where the guide starts to mutate and affect like living things, right? Like
Yes.
let's say in this example, it's like in the example I'm using, it's how the guide sort of has mutated the way dogs look and how people breed dogs. And of course, there's people who are trying to like do the opposite now and try to make dogs just enjoy living and like be able to breathe. I think there's a similar thing that Michelin does, right? It's this thing that's like it's this classification that really like transforms places and transforms
I
restaurants and
honestly really
transforms
agree.
cities, you know. I mean, before we're talking about like the Michelin restaurants in Asia, right? You had this
Mhm.
one stall in Singapore. Immediately, it's like it's booming. You know, there's like lines. It's hard. It becomes such an exclusive spot, but it's still kind of relatively cheap. I think of another spot I read about in
Mhm.
Thailand. This is where's I need to find this poor woman. All right, this is from an article about Jay Fai, the first Thai street food chef to receive the Michelin star. She's also battled to accommodate the massive rise in customers, and her neighbors have been angered by the crowds which gather in the quiet neighborhood, which desperately trying to get a table. So I think just through that snippet, you kind of see the effect that Michelin has, right? It's not just like some neutral thing that
Mhm.
like slightly alters a crowd. It like really drastically changes like
Yeah.
public life for these neighbors,
I
these
think the
neighbors, these
Michelin Guide likes
neighborhoods.
to act under the assumption that it's mutually beneficial for both themselves and the restaurants. But yeah, as you can see, it's kind of not because not I guess not everyone wants to be a Michelin chef, and not everyone is equipped to do that. Um, yeah, I honestly was thinking back on your message about like comparing the Michelin to like kennels because I'm like honestly yes, I think a big problem with like how global capitalism operates is that you see this kind of sameness. I think I was talking before how the Michelin is in line with like cruise ships and this kind of
Mm-hmm,
extractive tourism,
mm-hmm,
where a lot of people, especially rich people, just want to go on vacation, but they don't want to leave the comforts of their home. They don't want like the discomfort of traveling and the unfamiliarity of traveling. So you create these things like a Michelin guide or a cruise ship or an Italian restaurant in Korea or Singapore to make people who can travel this tourist class very comfortable. And I
mm-hmm.
think it is, yeah, to you say the detriment of the health of the society. I think if you're spending all if you're rerouting all this cooking talent, which could be, I don't know, cooking stuff that is more local or cooking stuff that is more exciting and isn't just French food in a place like Singapore and Thailand, and instead making them work these grueling unpaid shifts at these places, all for the sake of getting a 1 or 2 stars from Michelin. It's like, what exactly are we promoting here? And what kind of future do we want? Where anywhere you can go in the world, you can get the same white truffle, white asparagus.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's not exactly, yeah, it is similar to looking at like a bulldog and being like, you can't breathe and you die
Mm-hmm.
very soon because we have just chosen to believe that you're a dog that everyone wants.
Right,
And so
right.
yeah, it's like seeing a penguin in a Houston zoo. It's like sometimes you can do these things for tourism, but should you really?
Yeah, yeah. It's. I love that these things sort of reveal just the kind of, I guess, power and resources, right? It takes like
Mm-hmm.
it takes so much resources for I think like let's say like if you're up north of Quebec, you go to your grocery store and there's strawberries there. That's not just like, oh, I'm just going to the grocery store and there's strawberries. Like there's a lot of stuff that happened to get that there, right? Just to
Yeah.
appease two sort of things like having like tastes that you want uh 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 satiated year round, you
Yes.
know?
Unfortunately, I think this is Milton Friedman. Like people who are neoliberal, like often love to be like, "Do you know how many people it takes to make a pencil?" Because they're like, "You
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
mine the graphite, get the wood, bring it all together," and it takes like all of these steps and all these resources from different places to create this pencil. But honestly, they're right. Like you do look at the world and you're like, "Oh, like what are the maybe the implications of me having like Basque food in Abu Dhabi?"
yeah,
It's
yeah,
probably
yeah,
not
yeah,
good if you think about it. Like,
yeah.
what exactly did it lead to this point where also I think it's something that the Michelin president said in an interview I read. He was like, oh, yes, like we like to go places ahead of time and stake out if they have a food culture. And I think they were talking about Dubai and they were like, yeah, we were there 10 years ago when they didn't really have a food culture, but they have one now, which is actually one of the stupidest things I've heard anyone ever say. Because obviously there's a food culture in Dubai.
Of
People
course.
have been eating their food for a long time. It's just a question of, is there a European food culture there?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it is kind of
Exactly.
saddening to be like, oh, we have convinced places, especially in the inclusion of like places in the Middle East and East Asia that are now in the Michelin. It's like you have these rich people who are bending over backwards to conform to this European style of cooking. And you see
Hmm.
that on a small scale of like how people internalize racism and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna cook like, not to be like David Chang in Ugly Delicious, but like the stinky kimchi
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
instead of the sandwich. But then you also have people, you just see how these cultures are considered subordinate, and even when they're included, it's either as an exception or like an exotic oddity. So you get something like a place in Thailand, it's like $1 for noodles, or you get I don't know, like again, like a place that is a European fusion food, and it's
Hmm.
considered, yeah, special. And I think you also can see in the broader like world, that's often how people who are marginalized are included in these greater systems and these greater institutions like Michelin. It's always going to be an oddity or like, yeah, an exotic, like fun thing to have around. And it just serves to appeal like the Occident, to get all Edward Said here. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's really interesting, and it's honestly sad. Yeah, I'm thinking about all the chefs working at an Italian restaurant in Dubai, and I'm getting sad. I'm like, you should be doing anything else. The
Right.
fact
Yeah.
that the fact that an expensive French restaurant exists in a place like that or Morocco should honestly trouble people. It troubles me on a deep fundamental level that I don't think actually is that troubling. But when you think of the grand scheme of things, it is quite upsetting.
No, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I think you really get into. I think you really get into the heart of it, right? Because when we think about the weight of these kinds of Eurocentric desires and these kind
Mm-hmm.
of and this kind of like consumer base, right? This kind of moneyed consumer base. That's kind of, you can go back even to like the spice trade, right? About like kind of European desires to have things like spices from India and China, to have tea, right?
Yeah,
And
but it's
this was,
not to actually have India and China. It's to have these objects, to
of
have
course, yeah, yeah,
these
yeah.
things, but not
Nom,
actual the
nom,
real
nom, nom,
people.
nom.
Yeah, so like, what
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
convenient for me?
Nom, nom, nom,
Yeah, they're
nom.
like,
Get out the way.
tea.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Who are these people? Let's just get rid of them. You know, let's absolutely like starve them.
yeah, but it's
Complete
crazy
like
because yeah, you get a place like,
genocide.
yeah, like I think India's in it now, and like you can also see like if like the impacts of like British colonialism in India,
Hmm.
and a rejection of Indian people and a use of their like bodies as labor, but then also simultaneously this like fetishism of their ingredients, but only used in the proper British way.
Hmm. No, no, absolutely, yeah. It's like it has to be done a certain way. You know, anything
Yeah,
outside of that is not kind of allowed. I mean,
yeah.
that's why I think it's so interesting about the Michelin Guide in Asia, where they seem to sort of allow. I mean, they have a mix of places, right? They have a mix of recognizing these kinds of local haunts that serve good, cheap street food. Um, but
But
then
it's
they also still have the fine dining. But then
yeah.
it's a thing where it's like, if they do this to a place that's a fine dining restaurant, usually fine dining restaurants, just because they're run with the kind of the classic French military style kitchen, they're kind of, they have the capacity, right, to sort of
Mhm.
try to expand, and they have the structure to take in more people and make bigger bucks. But these smaller, like this Thai restaurant I was talking about in Bangkok, this is like a 72-year-old woman who's running this
Yeah.
place, and she's the only one who cooks.
Also, with entire like military style French cuisine, not a lot of people in the world eat one dish at a time. A lot of places will eat communally, and so
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it really eliminates a lot of places from being allowed to this place. But yeah, I just keep thinking about, yeah, the existence of like someone who grows up in a place like, I don't know, like literally Bangladesh or Singapore, and your entire life you're like, I want to cook European food. That is so
Hmm.
sad. Do you know how many
Yeah.
people had to like die and be colonized to get to that point where that's like encouraged? Like
No, of
these are things
course.
that like, yeah, like it also makes sense for a place like Japan or like Korea to pay the Michelin Guide, because it's just this like broader mentality, not to get all French on, but of like, yeah, of being colonized and wanting so deeply to appease the colonizer that it's just
Hmm.
become accepted by everyone in this culture that this is what we should be aiming for.
Right, right.
And
That this
yeah,
is the height of food excellence is just us becoming like
yeah.
whatever, like
And even in
versions of the
Canada, I mean, even
colonizers.
in Canada, it's sometimes it feels like we are a colonial state, and so like
Hmm.
all the food that's being celebrated is just like European food who famously colonized us.
Yeah.
But we're so long into the colonization process, it feels like secondhand. It feels natural. Like, obviously, we would have French food because we're Canadian, because we were colonized. We were founded by the French.
Hmm.
So yeah,
It's almost take it for granted, you know.
it's just
I
literally
think
taken for granted. Like I think it's easy to, it becomes easier to point out a place like I guess all the places, most of the places that are on this list were colonized. I guess Japan was, they were the colonizer, but like,
I mean they're still, I think they're a colonizer and they're still sort of colonized.
yeah, these things are taken for granted in Canada. Just this whole system. Yeah, and like I said earlier, it feels so obvious to state these things because you can look at it and be like, duh. But then you think about how it led to being this obvious, and you're like, damn, that sucks.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. We're sort of inheriting these kinds of like customs, cultures, these kinds of ideas of taste, what tastes are good, what tastes are not good, you know. I think it's interesting because these things sort of develop and they change, but it's still, I mean, it's always at the heart of it, just this kind of like Eurocentric idea of food, right? I mean, even like you see with this list, I think the Montreal list, there's like I think in the total list, so this includes the Bib Gourmand and the recommended restaurants. I believe there's two places with Asian cuisine.
I
One
think
of
one of
them,
them is Pampui.
one of them's
Pichet.
I think Pichai, the fancy pumpui, which
Yeah.
is like this nice like Thai place,
Yeah.
but it's sort of run by it's I believe it was started and run by white people, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of like it's always like you see this often where like
I
in
feel like I used to
food.
be mad about Pichet, but I now I'm like I kind of I'm like whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like
think
yeah.
it's not about them
It's
specifically.
not about that. I'm like
You can't be mad
whatever.
at them, right? But
Yeah.
it's I mean to introduce the Pichai and Pum Pui to people, it's like
Yeah.
this Thai restaurant. These two Thai restaurants that are sort of like very widely celebrated in Montreal, and the food there is good. You know, I've been there, and the food's
That's
nice.
the thing. It's pretty good. You go there and you're
Yeah,
like, this is
yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more this kind of thing about this restaurant that is doing things like the European or white centric kind of way that's kind of trendy branding and stuff like that, making this Thai food and then really being elevated and celebrated for that. Meanwhile, there's like tons of great Thai restaurants in the
Oh,
city, and
absolutely.
they're kind of completely overlooked, you know, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, I
Restaurant
don't, for whatever.
Thailandese.
Yeah, Restaurant Thailandese. I love Mama Bangkok out in the
Yeah.
Faubourg building. You know, that's like top notch Thai food. But then, for a lot of people, it's like, oh no, it just doesn't fit the idea of good restaurant. You know, it's not like quite this perfect image of like, oh, where's the white tablecloth? You know, where's the fancy totes? Where's the nice branding? You know, and
Yeah.
again, I'll say I love all those things about Pichai and Pumpu. You know, I love the
Yeah.
branding, I love the food there,
It's a
but
good
it is
place to
there's
go if
a
you want
complete
if
it's
you want to
uneven.
feel if you want to feel like very hip and you want to have some like
Hmm.
nasty natural wine, you go to Pichat. It's
Hmm.
definitely a vibe. It appeals to a certain demographic of young people. I don't think necessarily they're doing anything illegal. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's enough to be mad about because they're not being
Yeah,
exactly appropriative and they're not being exactly offensive. They're
yeah.
just kind of yeah like quirked up white people doing their
Yeah.
thing. But
Well,
yeah, it's crazy.
apparently they like study Thai food, and they apparently they make it very like to a T. And I
Yeah,
think that's believable.
they'll have like pop ups with Thai people. They seem to spotlight them. I don't know. They're
Like,
like, give me this
hey,
guy. They're like, it's
hey,
okay
he's good.
now.
He's good
Yeah.
with it.
They're like, they said it's okay for me to say
Yeah.
this, and you're like, But
Okay.
yeah, it's crazy to see what's excluded because it's just like, and yeah, the Michelin Guide. It makes sense that the only places that are going to be included are the places that will pay for them to go to.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Michelin Guide, you can't necessarily say it's like a good indicator of how the world is because yeah, they don't have anything in South America
No, exactly.
or Africa or Australia. I feel like Australia's
Yeah.
gonna be next because they got that money and
Yeah, I'm sure.
they
I'm
got the white
sure.
people.
It's just big. It's
I
just
bet the
big,
next
right?
place they're gonna go is like we are so excited to announce the Michelin star of Johannesburg.
Yeah. Uh oh.
It's like oh
We're
yeah,
here at the Boer Kitchen.
they're like
Um.
we're here
Yeah.
in Cape
So
Town with
what was
Diane
it?
Ward.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, the
Why
guys
is
in
it?
district. We're in District 9. Whoa.
Ooh, cat food. I mean, to take it back to Montreal, yeah, so that Thai place run by white people that was selected, and again, food there is good. Congratulations. And then the other place is a Japanese sushi place, which I
Sure.
think sushi has sort of like entered the realm of like,
Sorry,
sort.
wait. It's a sushi restaurant. That's actually jokes because
I
Montreal's
believe
famously terrible sushi place.
I
Because
am
number one,
almost.
where are they getting that fish?
Yeah. I'm almost certain it's a sushi place. Oh,
But
Korea.
yeah, sushi is like I feel like yeah, it's one of the few acceptable like Asian cuisines in fine dining.
And I do think there is sort of like this kind
There's a
of
craft.
political
Yeah,
there yes there's
yeah.
a craft
There's
of
a
course,
craft. I'll say.
but there is a political economic basis for that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
As Japan was like sort of like this like emerging like economic power in the
Yeah,
80s, like I think
yeah,
it was like the Japanese real estate market was like absolutely huge. It
yeah.
was like
Well,
it was a gigantic bubble,
they
right? I think it
also
was something like the grounds that the Kyoto Imperial Palace was on, just that lot was worth more than all the real estate in California combined, right? And this is at a level where like Japan's kind of like, I mean, you see this in like movies, right? Where like something like Alien, where they had like I forgot what the company's called. It's like Wayland Nakamura or something, where they had these
yeah,
visions of the future that has like Japan also big industry, you know. And I
yeah.
think through that you have this kind of osmosis of like whatever the Japanese salarymen and the business executives are eating. It's sort of entered the this I don't want to call it like the high level of like
Yeah.
fine dining, you know.
Well,
It was
I think
accepted because of
yeah,
that.
the inclusion of like Japan and a lot of East Asian countries and the Michelin, I think mirrors this like broader conversation that I've seen happening. I think it was oh my god, what's her name? Amy Chua, the Tiger Mom. she wrote like a book saying that I think like Asian Americans, she means Chinese Americans, are 2 generations behind Jewish Americans in terms of assimilating to whiteness.
Oh, interesting.
Crazy statement, crazy statement. But there have been like reports being like, oh, like Asian Americans make as much money as white people. They are like the highest income earners, and it has sparked what I've seen is like this broader discussion of if we can consider Asian Americans as part of like white air quotes. I say that really heavily,
Of course.
America. And I think Michelin, you can kind of see that where it's like this inclusion in these institutions is going to be very conditional, and it depends entirely on this like mode of economic development. It has relied entirely on Japan doing its Cool Japan program, which was launched in the 90s to
Hmm.
promote Japanese culture, which is why you see Nintendo everywhere, which is
Of
why
course.
you see everyone going to Japan. Like Japan is seen as very cool. And also with the rise of like China as an economic superpower and turning away from socialism and state socialism,
Hmm.
you have this inclusion of extremely rich Asian people who are now, yeah, in this club with the Michelin. They have the money to bring people there. They're spending all these millions of dollars to promote these industries. But again, it's all very conditional. It's only going to be, yeah, these certain things that are palatable. And I think if they didn't have the money, obviously they wouldn't be going. If they didn't have these political alliances, obviously these would not be considered high class. And I think that I don't know if it's permanent. Yeah, I'm very cynical to that notion that like a certain
Hmm.
amount of class ascension will absolve you of racial inequality
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, it absolves you until
until, yeah,
until,
and
right.
yeah, until things get bad and we need to cut some people out. Yeah.
No, of course. I mean, that's the whole thing about. I mean, there's the. I think to me, it makes sense what you're saying about this kind of. I mean, this theory, this hypothesis, right? That like Asian Americans, Chinese Americans are about to enter this kind of realm of like whiteness, right?
Mhm.
I think you have when you look back to it. I feel like you see that with like kind of like the things about being a model minority, right?
Mhm.
And just trying to like. I mean, this even goes back to kind of what we're saying about like this idea of like being of this sort of like racialized or oppressed kind of like class,
Mhm.
and the goal not being let's get rid of this what's oppressing people, but the goal becoming I want to become the oppressor. I want to elevate to their level and show them that I can be them. I can do that kind of
It's
stuff,
also
right?
seen as the same with like the model minority and as with like Jewish Americans and also like the black capitalist class that I think has been
Right,
written a
right,
lot
right.
about. It's like these are
Jay-Z.
also seen as the exception. They're seen as exceptional compared to other things. Asians are considered to be exceptionally hardworking in comparison to like black and Latino populations, and when
Hmm.
people of those communities then become successful, they're seen as the exception to the rule.
No,
It's
of
all kind
course.
of predicated on this anti-blackness, and I think yeah, you see it in the Michelin, and I think you see it as these things being considered exceptionally good for Thailand versus seeing them as humans. So you see this kind of like dehumanization in these small, subtle things.
Hmm. Yeah. I think there's always so much interesting things about food that I think are so political. I feel
It
like we're
is.
like exploring right now. I remember reading one thing about it was this old like Chinese conception of civilization,
Mm-hmm.
and it was through food. It was like their metric was using food, where it's like the more a culture or civilized or a society eats uncooked food, that was their definition of like or like how much they're barbarians or how much like if like I think it was specifically because I was researching about like Tibetan food and Chinese
Mm-hmm.
food and they're kind of like um I guess like interplay in the connections between them and what people were saying
Mm-hmm.
about them. One of the things I read was like one of these like Chinese like frontier towns. They talked about Tibetans being more barbarous because of the way they cooked food on like either like
Mm,
open flame or like hardly at all, and that
yeah,
was sort of some marker of like
yeah,
civilization, right? And it's interesting seeing that in play there, but also in play, of course, with like Michelin, right? And
yeah.
having this sort of expanded version and much more like I don't know, like granular
This
and
whole
like.
like yeah, their whole criteria being like the harmony of taste, like the
Hmm.
technique, and it's
Hmm.
like they are creating those rules much like the Kennel Club and applying them downwards instead of
Yeah,
upwards, and seeing instead of like seeing these techniques and being like, oh, what can we like absorb? It's like what can we enforce?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so funny. I remember seeing on Chinese social media, people create something called like white people lunch, and it's just when you
Oh
eat like
yeah,
raw
yeah, yeah.
vegetables and cold bread and cheese, because they're like it's so crazy that like white people don't cook their food. But then you actually think about it, because I remember anytime I've like visited like South America or Central America, people are like, why would you eat raw food? Because like most places, you have to cook your food to make sure it's
Hmm.
safe to eat. It's just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
standard food safety, which is why when people go to Mexico and they're like, oh, I'm not going to eat any street meat because I don't want to get food poisoning, and they eat lettuce. I'm like, you're
Hmm.
eating lettuce? My God. that's how you can get food poisoning is a raw
E.
vegetable.
coli.
Yeah, literally. I'm like, dumbass.
Boom, hit with the
Yeah.
E. coli spell. It's funny, yeah. It's funny the idea of like rawness too. I remember of uncookedness. I remember when I went to Paris when I was like 14. I went with my dad, my brother, my mom, and we are meeting some like family who was there. I begged us to go to a fancy restaurant. I wanted to go to.
Aw,
I think it was like shit and ease. It was this restaurant that
that's cute.
thank you. It was this restaurant that Anthony Bourdain went to, and I was like, I gotta try
Awesome.
it. And we go there, and I'm like looking at the menu, and I'm like, lamb, a rack of lamb. I get that. I think my mom gets that as well. My dad, like, I mean, classic, like, I don't know, this is like a Tibetan stereotype, but Tibetan, usually like old school Tibetan men just love meat, meat, meat,
Yeah.
meat. And my dad's looking at the menu. He's like, steak tartare, and his cousin's like, yeah, steak tartare. But they didn't know tartare was like, like, I mean, you and I know what tartare is, right? It's
Yeah.
completely like kind of like it's uncooked essentially, kind of like raw meat and with some kind of like accoutrements. The waiter brings out the steak tartare for my dad to look at. And my dad was like, he's about to cook this, right? And he's like, looks good. and then the waiter just leaves it at the table and then leaves. And my dad's like, hey, isn't he supposed to cook this? And the whole night they're like, I mean, neither of them I think one of them had a bite, but they're both too scared to like touch it, right?
I
So
mean, yeah, if you spend your entire life growing up on the steps and like cooking meat and like seeing maggots crawl out of meat and someone's like,
yeah,
just
yeah,
eat
yeah.
this, you'd be like, oh, because like back in the homeland and back in ye old days, you
Yeah.
just keel over and die.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I know how this goes.
Yeah, you're like, nice try.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talking about this expensive restaurant in Paris, I want to take us back to Michelin and the effects it might have. If we talk about prices, well, I remember when I sent the Michelin announcement that they're coming to Quebec to some friends. I was like, "Ooh, like this is some of my." I keep wanting this. I'm gonna say foodie. I'm a millennial,
Sure.
so I need to lean into it. My foodie friends, I was like, guys, look, Michelin's coming here. A lot of them would joke like, "Great, now the prices are about to go up," and I was kind of hesitant. I was like, really? I was like, they
Mhm.
wouldn't go up that much. And then I did the research.
Yeah, that's not good.
So one restaurant. This is in Canada too. So one restaurant in Vancouver, after receiving a Michelin star, upped their prices by 40%. But they said that receiving the star just accelerated the change, which would have just taken longer otherwise. And they go to defend the increase by saying the money is giving the workers more health benefits. Specifically, it states some mental health coverage that they can have now.
By God, they need it.
Yeah, yeah, we know restaurant workers need it. And they also said the money is going to a charity in the neighborhood where this restaurant is, which is Vancouver's downtown east side. Not
Gunshot.
quite. Yeah, yeah, not quite. I don't know. I mean, if people don't know, downtown east side is, I think, people say it's one of the poorest postal codes in Canada. It is probably the heart of the opioid epidemic. I think that's where Dr. Gabor Mate did a lot of his work with people who are unhoused,
Mhm.
homeless, addicts in the downtown east side. But yeah, I mean, you talked a bit about how the workers need it. Why did you say that? What's working in the restaurant industry like
It's
in fine
famously very
dining?
exploitative. Work a lot of hours. There's a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, and it's considered a badge of honor to have done these things. I think, yeah, Anthony Bourdain talks a lot about this in Parts Unknown. You see the popularity of the bear. I think people are attracted to the fine dining because there's a certain amount of like pain and hurt and suffering that goes into it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think when the Michelin comes into town, it does make workers' lives hard. Even if your workplace is good, it's just going
Hmm.
to be more stress. And yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, it's sort of that kind of comes with the territory, right? I think any industry really that tries to cater towards this kind of wealthier crowd, the moneyed kind of people.
It's always going to be customers, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something I read as well, that people were saying that even what happened with the Michelin, because there's actually a lot of chefs who either gave away their Michelin stars, who regretted it, who people call it a curse. Some of those chefs have said that with the Michelin star, people came in and they start complaining more. Right. It kind of brings in a more, I think even people said like entitled crowd,
Oh,
Um,
100%. I believe that.
yeah. I mean, you talk about Anthony Bourdain. I want to just mention I love this quote by Bourdain on Parts Unknown about Michelin. You can be the best chef in the world and still not get a Michelin star because you're not playing their game. And I think this sort of ties into everything we've been talking about this sort of very, I want to say, narrow idea of what food culture could be, of what fine dining can be, or of what fine dining already is, right? Because it's just like white tablecloths, certain
Yes.
experience, tiny plates,
Tweezers.
Yeah. Tweezers, the classic tweezers, chef's table and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I think with Michelin, I think to come back to main points I wanna touch on is like with Michelin coming to Montreal. Of course, you have a lot of talented chefs here in Montreal, a lot of talented teams who are getting recognized across Quebec as well, not just Montreal. But for me, the question is like, for me, if we're talking about what the ripple effect is, right? What the cost is, it's gonna be on the people who work at these places. It's gonna be the cost that comes with the weight of
Sure.
turning Montreal into continuing to turn Montreal into a playground for wealthy tourists.
An easy analogy is gentrification. When the prices go up in one place, they're going to go up other places because
Yeah.
places are going to want to also get into some of that money, and it's going to price people out. And it's definitely less nefarious because not everyone has to eat at a five-star restaurant and not everyone has to go.
Hmm.
But you'd see small things like more places are going to want to cater to this, to this like elite class of tourists. More places are going to want to expect this. And anytime, I think one thing that's often left out of the conversation of gentrification is like the actual labor that goes into upholding these new buildings, these
Hmm.
new like service people who are going to be working that. And yeah, it's just going to further reinforce the divide between those who can pay people to serve food to them and those who can only serve food as a living.
No, absolutely. I mean, to me, like there's different kinds of way. I mean, that's the thing about like tourism, right? We're talking about extractive tourism before, and
Mm-hmm.
this is for those who are unaware. This is kind of a concept put forward by Vijay Javadi, who I had on the show recently.
Hey.
Hey, shout out VJ. It kind of talks about mass tourism industry and the kind of deleterious effects it has on places and local populations, right? I'm going to read an excerpt from an article he wrote in Al Jazeera. Like a gold rush to the latest discovery of untapped ores, a panoply of hotel chains, foreign tour operators, online booking agencies, airlines, real estate speculators, and multinational construction companies quickly rush to capitalize on any curiosity that a visitor might have towards any site of historical or natural value. Examples of attraction sites become mining pits for an extractive tourism industry abound. So in this kind of sense, VJ is just trying to talk about like how certain kind of either places that you go to sightsee, these kinds of classic spots to go to in a city for tourists, become like the open pit mine, right? They become this thing that's like completely hounded on, rushed to, and I think these Michelin starred restaurants, absolutely, even the ones on the list, kind of like play into that idea, right? Like if we
Mm-hmm.
think about this is to say Montreal, of course, already has sort of different versions of like extractive tourist sites, some of them too, like just of course to a wide spectrum of like effects. I think one of the clear ones is like Oshiaga.
Oh,
A
for
lot of
sure.
our music festivals, I think there's some music festivals that try to cater towards more like a broad kind of neighborhood things. Other things are much more localized to one spot, like Oshiaga. Compare that to something like Pop Montreal, which is across the city, right? There's clearly different ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
um and we do this to get these kinds of like foreign visitors, different kind of like moneyed people. I think music festivals are much more accessible than something like, um, I don't know,
Oshiaga is like
Michelin.
as expensive as Coachella. It's like almost
Is
$500.
it?
I think it's like
Whoa,
350,
whoa,
$500. Very expensive. I've only the only
wow!
people I know who go to Oshiaga are like journalists who manage to like sneak their way in with the media pass. That's the only way I've
Shout out,
gone.
shout
Yeah,
out. You ever been to Oshiaga?
just
It's
once on
nice.
media. I think I talked about literally the last I was on here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I guess to talk about this kind of idea of extractive, and I think I can end on this now for the episode. But yeah, for sure, it becomes an open pit mine. It's an open pit mine in terms of labor, in terms of money, in terms of who is getting priced out, and honestly, in terms of vibes. Like having
Mm-hmm.
been to a big festival or having been to a big tourism spot, the vibes of a place are completely out. Like
Mm-hmm.
going to a place like the Trevi Fountain in Rome, all it is tourists taking a photo. There's no real engagement with the place. People are
Mm-hmm.
going there to take a photo with something that other people told them was cool to send back to their friends. It's very just checking out the box. It is for your own personal gain. It's not for any deeper understanding of the world. And in terms of these Michelin restaurants, it's not for any deeper understanding of food. It's not for any more exciting understanding of food. It's not for a bolder or more diverse one. It's simply something you did because someone told you to do, because that is the way you achieve status in this world. And so I definitely see that analogy of the open pit mine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you think? I don't know. Do you imagine any? alternatives to this Michelin guide? How should people, if people want to have a nice restaurant, explore the city, how do you think they should do it?
Word of mouth. Ask a friend. Ask for a
Okay.
recommendation. That is the best guide. Is to turn to your
Mm-hmm.
coworker and be like, "I want to eat somewhere. Where should I go?"
Mm-hmm.
That is always the best way to find something out, or to go honestly within a certain thing. Go to a place that looks like busy. If there's a
Mm-hmm.
huge line, it's probably a Michelin place. But if it's always busy, if there's good foot traffic, there's probably a reason why people are there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
guide. Sometimes it's because it's genuinely good.
yeah. That's an excellent way to find some places.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I think I, what I like about that is you build community, right? It's not just
Yes.
like you go to a spot and you come back to your house. You're actually like you're talking to people, you're talking to
And then
friends
you
about,
can
hey,
talk to your
let's hit
friend and
up
be
a
like, "Oh, I
spot.
went, and it was good. It was bad. I can't
Yeah,
believe
yeah,
you
yeah.
told me to go to that place."
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
something like that.
Build up that collective knowledge, of
Yeah.
what spots are good.
It's not
Pers-
necessarily like it's not a groundbreaking thing to like burn down the Michelin, and it's not like a new like hack to get out of it, but it's just like a different way of seeing the world.
no, yeah, yeah. I think I always think this kind of news is kind of useful to like not just be a buzzkill, but I think to use these kinds of developments in Montreal and elsewhere as sort of jumping off points for
Yeah,
these kinds of conversations, which I knew you would come to a conversation with
of
packed,
course.
ready to throw down. Appreciate it a
Cool.
bunch.
Well, it was so lovely being on this. I hope you enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.